Hey everyone, today we're going to build this type of interaction inside of Articulate Storyline 360. And we're going to build that from scratch. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, welcome back. If you haven't checked out my website already, go ahead and check out my website at learningdojo.ninja. Here you can find all previous blog posts of different tips and tricks for Storyline and XAPI, as well as augmented reality and other topics. You can also go into our templates section and download templates for Articulate Storyline 360 and XAPI, including video templates, as well as interactive PDFs and other things like that. You can also check out full courses on Articulate Storyline 360 where we cover everything from A to Z, everything you need to know about Articulate Storyline 360, as well as Adobe Captivate, XAPI Fundamentals, Articulate Rise, Custom SCORM, and HTML5 video. But like I mentioned before, we are going to be building this kind of tabs interaction inside of Articulate Storyline 360. Now this interaction is to help introduce a team. So you have different team members and so the person can click on who that person is and then get some more information. So it's a simple tab interaction and we're not going to use any type of variables or anything like that. It's going to be all through just triggers and other things like that. So we do need to visually set this up, and when you click on it, we then need to have the different layers and it'll animate in, and you can see that there's a close button down below. So everything from scratch, we're going to use the Articulate Storyline 360 Contents 360 library. That is a mouthful, but we're going to use those images so you don't have to download any other images. You can just create everything from scratch here. Now, the idea of this is to just walk you through some of my processes on how to build an interaction like this. Now, everyone I've noticed builds something slightly different, and so one person may have one way of doing something, another person may have another way of doing something, which is not to say that one way is wrong or the other way is right. It's just to say that people have different styles. So I'm going to show you kind of what works for me and see if you can pick up on a thing or two here as well. So let's go ahead and pull up Articulate Storyline 360, and I'm going to click on the new project, and we're going to go ahead and create a new project. Now I always like to set up my stage size to be the right stage size. I like a little bit wider screen as well. So what I do is I come into the design tab. Let's go into one of these pages first of all, but I'm coming to the design tab, then I go into slide size here. And then I'm going to select this drop-down box to be a 16:9 ratio. This usually fits an iPad or tablet device a little bit better than the 4:3 ratio there. With this, I at least like to up it to 1,000. So I know that I have 1,000 pixels wide to work with. Now what Storyline 360 is going to do when it exports out is it's going to take up the amount of screen size that's available in the browser. So you don't actually have to have it perfect. But if you start out with a very small size and then it expands out, it's going to look pixelated. So you want to start out on a decent size so when it expands out, it's not looking pixelated. So keep that in mind if you're working with courses that look pixelated and look bad on different browsers. It's probably because the initial size is really small. So I'm going to go back into here and click OK. Now I have that kind of wider screen size there. And if I want everything to fit inside of my view, I need to go up to the view section and click on fit to windows. So now if I stretch out my stage or my timeline area, it will still kind of fit in that view. I'm going to need to change that at one point when I'm working with some of the people pictures, but for now that at least works out pretty well. Let's go ahead and do a couple of things as far as our setup goes. I also want to go into the Home tab. I'm going to go into player here, and then I'm going to remove the player. I'm only working with one interaction for this example. I don't have to have the different page navigation or menu or anything like that. So the quickest way to get rid of everything is just to go into the menu and controls and clicking that off. And so now when I preview this, it's just going to show the page content. It's not going to show everything else around it. I've just removed it with just one button click there. So you can see it still has kind of the black sides and as well. So you could change like the background color to be a light color if you wanted to. But for now that works. So I'm going to go ahead and click on close preview. And so let's go ahead and start building our page. Now I'm picking an orange theme. You could pick a blue theme or whatever you wanted to, but I'm going to pick an orange theme. And we're going to kind of play with those different colors here. I want to go in and adjust the background color first of all. So I'm going to go into my design tab and I'm going to go into background styles and I'm going to click on format background. Now when I click on format background, this is where I can pick the color of the background and I'm going to pick the gradient fill color. Now the gradient fill color, you can see if I move this to the side, will have different colors from top to bottom. In fact, there's 3 different stops here, and I just want to work with 2 of those stops. And those stops are really just kind of, stop 1 is up here, stop 2 is kind of 50% there, and stop 3 is down here. You can have as many stops as you want. If you wanted to get like a rainbow color or something like that, you can do that with several different stops. Again, I'm going to take that middle one that's kind of set at 50% stop position and click on remove. So now I just have, I added another one, but now I have stop 2, which is set at 100, and then stop 1, which is set at 0. Now 0 is on the top, 100 is down at the bottom. I'm going to pick a color, and this is going to be kind of an orange, darker orange color. And that's not exactly the color I want. What I like to do is kind of pick a color close to what I'm going to get, but then I can select this drop-down box, go into more colors, and then adjust the shade right here on this dial. And you can see exactly this is what it was before, and this is what the new color is going to be. And to me, that looks a little bit better, so I'm going to click OK. Now let's go ahead and go to stop 2, and I like to just have a hint of gradient. I don't want it to be very drastic, but just a slight hint of a gradient, a color change. So I'm going to select that same color here, but we're going to go into the more color, and we're going to just bring this a little bit further up. So it's a little bit lighter orange right there. So again, just kind of a slight change. All right, I think that looks good for now. So I'm going to click close, and let's create our title bar up on top. So I'm going to click on the insert button, and we're going to create a rectangle here. And I'm going to drag this out, and I'm going to just double click in there and say meet the team. Now the font I'm using is a custom font that I downloaded from Google Fonts, which is the Open Sans font. You can download from Google Fonts and install a font and use that there. I'm going to select that here and go into my Format tab, go into the outline, and I don't like the outline. I don't like how it looks. It adds extra around the shape itself, so I like to get rid of that completely. I'm going to have this kind of a black bar up on top, so let's go ahead and select black. And I'm going to add a little bit of a drop shadow. With drop shadows, I like to have them very subtle. It's where you can tell that it has a little bit of depth to it, but not too much. So I'm going to go into shadow and then have this drop box for the shadow be a little bit below here. Now that's not exactly what I want, so you can fine tune the shadow by coming into this little expand button, and this will expand so you can adjust the shadow over on the left hand side here. You can adjust the shadow how you want. So I'm going to up the transparency a little bit. We'll up it to 85% here. And the size is 100%, that's fine. Sometimes people like to go above the size. You can change the angle and distance and so forth. But I think that's good. It just has a nice subtle shadow. It's not too much there. But now we can go ahead and add our different people. There's a couple different ways of doing this. When you're working with people pictures, you can actually crop to a shape. And I have a completely different video you can check out there on how to crop images to shapes. We're going to work a little bit different than that because I want to have a different background color, and I want to add some color to the person, and I want to add a title bar down at the bottom. And so that's why I want to not just do with one shape and crop it there. I'm going to kind of do layers and then combine them all into the different states. And so it's a couple different steps. Again, some people have different ways of doing this. This is the way that I found works for me. And so we're going to go ahead and do it this way. Now, because the size is 1,000 pixels, I basically split that up. I want to have 4 different people. So because it's the size of 1,000, I have 250 pixels for each of these rectangles that I can use. I'm going to come into my Insert tab, and we're going to create these rectangles now. And I want to have these rectangles go a little bit below this title bar, which means that for now, I'm going to have it above, and then we're going to move it below here, because that way the shadow is visible, more visible on there. So that'll make more sense once we get to it. So let's go ahead and go to the Format tab. Let's make sure that this width is 250, just so we can get it exact. And then we can copy and paste this. Now, I haven't adjusted the style yet, but that's fine. We can go ahead and adjust that later. but I'm just going to copy and paste that, and so it's kind of even across the stage there. If you need to make sure that it's all aligned and spaced out evenly, you can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just hold the shift button down, and there is this horizontally space out just to make sure it's all spaced out nice and fine there. You can also align it to the bottom if you wanted to. All right, so I'm going to name these objects. When I talk with my students, I always like to emphasize that you should name your objects, because when you start to work with the different interactions and you start to add triggers to it with the names, it makes more sense. It makes it easier to know, okay, when this gets clicked on, this happens. So I moved my title bar up on top just so I can have that kind of overlapping these different squares. And I'm going to go ahead and rearrange these. So rectangle 2 will be up there, and rectangle 3 and rectangle 4 and 5. So this is going to be square 1, or we'll actually come back and name those once we've actually inserted our people pictures. But let's go ahead and adjust the style for this first one, and we can copy and paste it to other ones using the format painter. I'm going to come in here and change this, and first of all remove the outline, and then I'm going to change the color to that orange type of color, but maybe a little bit lighter. And we're going to adjust the different colors on each of these. I'm going to come into the shape fill. We'll select that darker color first of all for this one. And then we'll get into, now I could either do it this way, or I could select this drop down box under shape fill, and I could go to more fill colors. And then if I click on the eyedropper here, you can get that color here and then just kind of slide it up so it's a little bit lighter there. All right, I also want to add a drop shadow because I want each of these to look like they're kind of overlapping the other one. And you can do that with a slight drop shadow to the right. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to select the drop shadow and select this to be on the offset right. So you can see it kind of adds a little bit of separation with the other one, and it looks like it's overlapping. So I'm going to adjust that because I don't like how harsh the drop shadow is by default. So let's up that to 80. And click OK, and I think that looks a little bit better. All right, so I could take this, and using the format painter, I can copy and paste this style to everyone else. Now I want to adjust the orange color to be slightly different on each of these, but at least getting it to this point and then adjusting the colors is a little bit easier than having to go and change the colors on every single one of them. So let's go into the format painter. So under the home tab, you can click on Format Painter, and one by one you can actually select one of these, like select the Format Painter and then select it. Or you can double click on Format Painter and just quickly select all of them, like one by one still, but you don't have to select it, Format Painter, and then select that. So once I'm done with the Format Painter, I can uncheck that, and you can see that looks really nice. But I want to adjust the colors to be kind of slightly different. Let's go ahead and adjust this one. First of all, so I'm going to go into select the drop down box to 4 more fill colors, make that kind of slightly lighter. Let's go into this one, more fill colors, make that even slightly lighter than the other one. And you can see that's maybe a little bit too light. You may have to play around with this a little bit, but all right, I like that. So let's go in here and go into more fill colors and do even lighter there. All right, I like that. I kind of like the cascading darker to lighter tone there. So now what I'm going to do is add these people pictures, and I'm going to crop them to these different shapes. Now I could take them and put them inside of the shape, which I eventually will, inside of the states and everything. But for now, I want to just go ahead and resize the people pictures and then crop them to the shape to fit. Let's go ahead and use the people pictures that are inside of the Content 360. So I'm going to go ahead into Insert, and we're going to go into the characters here, which is the Content Library 360. And we're going to download a couple different pictures. I want to have business casual, and I know that I want to use Mitchell here, I want to use Jet, and I want to use Sheila, and I want to use Laura. So Laura's already downloaded. I can go ahead and just select Laura and click on Insert, or I can go to Pose and find a different pose. And so whatever you wanted to do here, there's a certain pose you want to work with Laura. I'm going to go ahead and click on Insert on that one. Now she gets inserted pretty small, but I can resize her. I want to really have her take up most of the rectangle here. I can do this by coming in here and just kind of resizing her until I get to the size that fits. Or I could also come into the View tab and uncheck where it says Fit to Window. And then I can go to like 50% here. And so it's pretty small at that point, but now I can resize these people pictures a little bit easier. So I'm going to go in and just kind of adjust this. And even if she's kind of overlapping, that's fine. We can adjust it so her shoulders, I actually want it to cut off at some points on her shoulders here. So we'll get that style here in a little bit. But you can see one other thing I want to take a note of is this height. I want each of the people pictures to be the same height. Otherwise, somebody's face might be a little bit smaller, like a lot smaller than what somebody else's face might be. So I want it to be slightly even. So that's why I just make note of what that size is. So it's about 1100 basically. So I can resize all the other people pictures that way. So now what I want to do is crop this to the shape. And so I can come in here because I'm zoomed out already. I can hit the crop button and then I can go ahead and resize that and it will kind of snap to the shape here. I can resize that to shape, click on crop, and there we go. So it's not quite perfect, but we can fix that later. That's fine. In this view, I want to go get the other people pictures. So I'm going to click on insert here. We're going to go find another person. I'm going to select Mitchell. Well, let's go Jet first of all. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the same thing here. So this is going to be 1100. There we go. Let's kind of make him center there. And so let's go ahead and crop him. So I'm basically repeating the same thing that I was doing with Laura. And there we go. So I'm going to fast forward. You can watch me as I fast forward, and I'm pretty much doing the same thing with the next two here. All right, so I had to tweak those a little bit. So once they came back into here, I kind of just adjusted the crop, which you can select the image and go into crop and adjust it that way. They're not exactly perfect yet, but we're gonna take these images and we're gonna move them next to their own squares. So I have Laura here, which is going to be rectangle 1 here. I have Jet here, which is going to be rectangle 2. I have Sheila, which will be rectangle 3. And then, or Laura will actually be rectangle 2, Jet will be rectangle 3, and then Sheila will be rectangle 4, and Mitchell will be rectangle 5. Now we're going to rename those so they make more sense here, but at least notice how just positioning that kind of takes care of those overlapping things here. The next thing I want to do is I want to make these different people kind of an orange tint because I want the hover to show once I hover over the person, and that's when they come into their full color here. So I'm going to select this color, go into Format, and then I'm going to go to Recolor, and I'm going to select this orange accent color. Now you can go into more colors if you wanted to, but I think this orange one does pretty good. So I'm going to select Jet here, go into orange, and then select Sheila. And in fact, I can just do Format Painter just to speed things up. Select Sheila and select Mitchell there. So now I want to add a simple kind of title bar down at the bottom. We'll add a shape, and that shape is going to have that person's name. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the outline here, go to black, and then double click in here, and let's do all caps, Laura. And I want to make this one a little bit transparent. So you can adjust the transparency by going back into this expand area and just adjusting the transparency right here. I don't want to make it too obvious. Let's do about 30% there and hit close. There we go. So now I could just copy and paste that into the different spots. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and change this one to Jet. Let's go ahead and change this one to Sheila. And let's go ahead and change this one to Mitchell. I have not saved this yet, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Control S. And I'm going to go ahead and just call this one Tabs. Okay. So let's go ahead and reorganize this so each of them are kind of in their own areas. I'm going to take Laura and I'm going to move this right above Laura here, the character. Take Jet, move that right above Jet. We'll take Sheila, move that right above Sheila, and then take Mitchell and move that right above Mitchell there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Laura and Laura's image, and we're going to cut that. So Control X or Command X if you're on a PC, parallels. And then we're going to go into Rectangle 2 here and go into Edit States, and we're going to hit Control V. So we have to click in here somewhere before you can do it, but Control V to paste it inside of there. Now that simplifies things a little bit because now I'm just working with one rectangle instead of 3 different objects here. I could just group them together and that could work, but when you're grouping and you're adding triggers, sometimes you may need to ungroup and then it removes the trigger. So I like to do it this way instead. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna speed this part up in the video. I'm just basically taking it, cutting it, and then pasting it inside of there. All right, so now that we have them all kind of grouped together inside of the states, let's go ahead and rename our objects so it makes more sense, and then we'll take care of the hover state. So this is going to be Laura. This one will be Jet. Let's name this one up here Top Bar. We'll name this one Sheila, and we'll name this one Mitchell. All right, so let's go ahead and take care of the hover states, and let's do that now just by clicking on Laura, going into states, and what I'm going to do is this doesn't get copied over when I actually create a hover state. So I'm going to select Laura, the image, and Laura, the top bar here, just holding the shift button down to select both of those. And I'm going to hit Control C and then create a new state here. Select the drop down box to hover, click on add, and then I'm going to paste that person inside of here. Now what I'm going to do is select this person, but we're going to remove on the hover state, we're going to remove this person or remove the color. So I'm going to go back to recolor and then select the no recolor. So that way when it's hovered, that person comes back into full color here. So I'm going to click done now, and we're going to repeat the same thing here. So I'm going to speed this part up as well, but I'm going to repeat it for the next 3. All right, now that that's done, let's go ahead and preview it and see if we get the hover states all right. So I'm going to come up to the top here, click on preview. And as I hover, you'll notice that they come into full color once I hover over them. So we got this working initially, but now we need to create the different layers and we need to trigger those layers and have the layers animate in. We've covered a lot so far today, so I'm going to go ahead and call it for part 1 here. But in part 2, we'll go ahead and create the layers and have those layers animate in. So I'll see you next time. If you like this video, make sure that you like and subscribe, and make sure that you go to my YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you're notified of all new videos that come out. And if you have any other suggestions of different interactions you want to see with Storyline, go ahead and go to my YouTube channel and comment down below on this video of what else you want to see. But again, this is just part 1. We'll go ahead next week and talk about part 2. And if you haven't checked out part 2 yet, and that's out, I'll link to this once part 2 is out from here as well. But thanks everyone, I'll see you next time.